So let's take this discussion of the value chain and start to look at how the resources factor into it. This is a chart from another textbook, but I think it explains it very well. You start with the resources and then you combine them, quote unquote, into capabilities and core competencies. You see the little yellow box on the chart. What is happening here? I have to tell you, that is one of the great unknowns or imponderables or whatever lofty term you want to use, because this part of strategy talks about this like it's a very cookbook. Okay, you take resources and you combine them and you get core competencies and away you go. Not so fast. I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but what's happening in that, how do we get these capabilities from the resources, is pivotal, because in a lot of cases you look at companies and they have access to the same resource base, but yet they generate very different outcomes, and you have to ask yourself why. And I think it's because of what's happening inside that little yellow box. But what's happening inside that little yellow box is a little hard to get our hands around. And in the process, we're going to talk about the 4 criteria of sustainable competitive advantage. And we've already talked about managing the value chain. The textbook does a nice job of discussing tangible versus intangible resources, so I'm not going to beat that to death. The simple rule of thumb is if you can put it on a balance sheet or you can see it, it's tangible. Otherwise, it's intangible. I don't like how the textbook copped out and created this third set of resources it calls organizational capabilities. To me, if I have to split, I'm about 75 intangible, 25 tangible. If you see the organizational capabilities, or I'm sorry, the organizational resources like its planning functions, control functions that are identified as a tangible resource, I agree with that. The rest of the organizational, I think, is intangible, and it really is kind of that crux of how do you combine these sorts of things, and then that's where you get your knowledge, your innovation, your reputation, and the like. In the middle 20th century and up toward the latter part of the 20th century, tangible resources were seen as the key to success. That's no longer the case. Typically, intangible resources are seen as the key to a firm's ability to outperform its rivals. Why is that? Well, here is this great matrix of whether you can evaluate whether a resource is likely to lead to competitive advantage. The first question is, and you get this by looking at the chart, is it valuable? If it's not valuable, then it seems obvious that it wouldn't lead to a competitive advantage. Why would a firm do something that's not valuable? Well, maybe whether it's valuable or not is in the eye of the beholder. Google, for example, is involved in a lot of science projects, self-driving cars, and a litany of other things that seemingly have no tie to the business. Are they valuable? We don't know yet. Obviously, Google thinks they are, but into the future, perhaps today, you can trace that stuff back and see it's not having any current value. So first of all, it has to have value. Secondly, it has to be rare. Again, it makes sense that if something is valuable but everybody's got it, it can't be a source of competitive advantage because everybody's got it. Loyalty programs are like that. Believe it or not, loyalty programs haven't been around forever. They actually came out in the 1970s when American Airlines created its Frequent Flyer Club, was one of the first great loyalty programs. How long did it take to imitate, for its rivals to imitate that Frequent Flyer program? About that long. And so America got a very temporary competitive advantage because what it had was rare only for a short period of time. So then, if it's something that's going to yield anything more than just a momentary competitive advantage, you have to ask yourself, how hard is it going to be to imitate this resource or this capability? And this is where, so it's the third criteria: valuable, rare, hard to imitate. And then you have these 4 questions to ask yourself, how hard is it going to be to imitate this? So the first question is physical uniqueness. Certainly patents play into that to the extent that they provide some sort of protection. This is also one of those white sands of Waikiki. There's only so much white sand beach on Waikiki in Honolulu, Hawaii. And so to the extent that a hotel owns a chunk of that white sand beachfront property, it's physically unique. There's only so much of it, and so it's going to be hard to imitate, although you can see people went to other white sand beaches in an attempt. So physical uniqueness. This is like the best corner for retail in an or in a town. So you can sometimes see for local firms, you go, wow, that's the best location. Nobody's going to match that location. The second is path dependency, and this is simply to say that history matters. Let me give you a couple of examples. One is, why does Southwest Airlines, a Dallas-based company, have so much better labor relations than does American Airlines, a Fort Worth-based company? Same city, different starting time. American Airlines is one of the great legacy air carriers, and it went through the period of the 40s and 50s and early 60s when unions were very powerful and very acrimonious in their dealings with companies. Southwest started in the early 70s. Contrary to popular, it's a myth that Southwest isn't unionized. Southwest has a highly unionized workforce, but it came from a different era of union relations, and a lot of its workers are not unionized with some of the major long-time labor unions, so they have a completely different relationship with management than does Americans, and so history matters. Here's another example of history mattering. Had a student that pointed out that some golf courses are more valuable than other golf courses because of the PGA tournaments that are played there. So you go play this and you can think, oh, this is where the US Open is played. If Tiger Woods ever surpasses Jack Nicklaus in his number of majors victories, and it doesn't happen on like where the Masters is played every year, it happens at a golf course that doesn't always host one of those things. Think of the advantage that's going to be in terms of competitive advantage. They have something that they can market for many years. Come play the course where Tiger Woods broke Jack Nicklaus's record. That's history. Next is causal ambiguity. It's really not clear to us why this exists. And you may think that's impossible, but really not. And here's an open question. Why didn't Apple stock plummet immediately after Steve Jobs died? Because people had some level of confidence that Apple wasn't all Steve Jobs, but then again, we don't know that, do we? It's not far enough along to see whether Apple could continue to roll along like it has without Steve Jobs. So it's causal ambiguity. And the last is social complexity. And frankly, that's a pithy way of saying humans are involved. In almost all cases, if humans are pivotal to the operation, then it's going to be socially complex. Now let's go to our outsourcing example. Let's say that I rely on a company for an outsourcing arrangement, and it's a very arm's length relationship. It's a contract. Don't go face to face. Don't deal with them. That sort of stuff. Not a lot of social complexity there. Imagine though I have an outsourcing relationship with a company where they give me a better price than everybody else. They move my product to the front of the line. When I need it there, they're more open to making changes for me. Those are all things that indicate a relationship and there's social complexity. So someone may contract with that same company. They're not going to get the same product that I do because of the social complexity of our relationship. So humans involved, socially complex. So in this idea of can you imitate it, it's valuable, it is physically unique, path dependent, causal ambiguity, and socially complex. And then we get to the final criteria of substitutes. But you're going to have to watch the next video for me to pick that up. See you in a minute.